Everyone, welcome to our third town hall. I hope everyone is doing well. In a moment, I will introduce you to our guest, Scott Hanselman. But before we begin, I would like to make a couple of announcements. Next Monday, which is October 31st, we will not be holding a town hall since it is Halloween and that could be a busy day for some of us. So we will postpone that until the following Monday. Please remember to post any questions on YouTube, on the YouTube chat, and we will answer those towards the second half of the town hall. So I would like to introduce you to Scott Hanselman. Scott is a teacher, speaker, and programmer for over 30 years. He works for the web platform at Microsoft. He blogs about technology, culture, gadgets, diversity, and code. Scott has 3 podcasts, and you can follow him on many social media platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. He's also written a number of technical books and has spoken in person to over 1 million developers worldwide. So we're very lucky to have Scott. He's an advisor to the software development curriculum, and he'll talk a little bit about his background. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for letting me hang out. I look forward to hearing from folks in the chat or any questions. If anything pops up, please feel free to interrupt and see if we can get some audience interaction, because that's always appreciated. Yeah, so my name is Scott Hanselman, and like Lorraine said, I've been a programmer for money since 1992. And I work currently at Microsoft, where I'm a partner software manager. And being at Microsoft for so long, now 15 years, I still get very nervous when I'm in a new room and I don't have like a fancy degree. I went to Portland Community College, and then I took that 2-year degree and I turned it into a degree at a state college here in Oregon. And that was done over the course of 11 years. So I was 11 years in tech, going to school at night when I got my 4-year degree. So it's important to point that out, because so many people have a different path into tech. And you meet people who say, oh yeah, my dad was on the curriculum of Stanford or whatever. And then you meet someone and they tell you they went to MIT or something. And you're like, oh, is that a community college? So I still, 30 years in, have this sense of imposter syndrome. And I think it's important that in forums like this and others that we have those conversations. I know that you think that that's important, Lorraine, that to say that out loud is important. Even 30 years into tech, I sometimes feel like maybe I shouldn't be in this room, but we need to remind ourselves that you're supposed to be here. Don't you think?
No, it's great that you mentioned that, because that's definitely something I know myself struggle with the imposter syndrome, and I know many of our participants speak on that. So it's almost a breath of fresh air to hear that you're 30 years in and you're so accomplished, at least in our eyes, and you still feel this way.
Well, so many things right now are about identity, and we look at someone and you make your judgments and you say, oh, there you go. He's a 50-year-old straight white guy and he looks vertical. He must have the world, on his side. And in many ways that I do, in many ways that I have so many privileges, a backpack full of privileges that I could unpack. But my dad was a firefighter. My mom was a zookeeper. And, I feel sometimes like I'm the only one that made it out of the neighborhood. But then when I realized all I needed to do was put on a suit, and then no one ever asked me where I came from or who my parents were or what school I went to. And in all my time at Microsoft, I have this concern about my Portland Community College degree, no one's ever asked. And what a privilege that is. So it's super important for me and others, and I know you feel strongly about this, to lend our privilege in whatever form that it is. Because the great thing and the exciting thing about privilege, and why it's so important when increasing access to careers in tech, is I have an unlimited amount. The backpack is unlimited. And what's exciting about that, and what's exciting about Reskill Americans, is this opportunity to create luck, to literally create luck out of nothingness. And by that, I mean luck is being prepared plus an opportunity presenting itself. And there's so many people who are prepared, but then that opportunity is not happening. Or they have lots of opportunities and people are saying, come work for me, come work for me. I don't have the skill. I'm not prepared. And when you look at someone, whether it be me or yourself, Lorraine, or someone else, you say, wow, what a lucky person. Oh, they're so fortunate. They must have had lots of luck in order to do this. Sometimes people get a little bristly and they kind of like, well, I worked hard. Well, yeah, sure, you worked hard. That's great. I worked hard too, but I was ready for when the luck happened. So then now I can invent luck. I can create luck through a retweet or a forwarding or a LinkedIn connection or a warm introduction. And it costs me nothing. So sending the ladder back down and having tech veterans offer their training, their mentorship, their support for anyone costs me nothing and gains only luck for those. So I like to be able to create luck and to be the luck for someone else through a warm introduction or, Lorraine, you should talk to so-and-so. And then you make a connection and then you back away. And if they're ready, then the luck happens. And if they're not, then you skill up and then the luck will be there another day. Does that make sense?
No, I absolutely, and I love it. You may not know, I was a participant of Reskill Americans in the first cohort. And I really truly believed in the program. And now I'm in an opportunity to kind of be on the other end. And as you said, I could be hopefully the luck to somebody, have a connection for someone, and just pass on what was given to me when I was at Reskill.
Exactly. And what a feeling that is, that you're not going to run out of that ability. You can just keep doing this. I can do, like Captain America says, I can do this all day. So, if you're ready for a career in tech, then there are now people who are here to make those connections. And that's why it's such an important thing. So I very much kind of like to stand in that privilege and then try to lend it, try to offer it to others with support. I do it on my TikTok and on my YouTube and my blog and my podcast. I've been doing these things for many years. I've had a blog for 20 years. And I look at that as an opportunity to, how people always email you and they say, can I pick your brain? I usually say no, because it doesn't scale. I can't do 30-minute meetings with everybody. It doesn't work. There's only so many hours. So when someone sends me a question, I think to myself, that question is a gift. What a great question. But if I'm going to go and give you 3,000 of my keystrokes and type for 30 minutes, and then you go, thanks, and then add me on LinkedIn, what did we get out of that? Nothing. But if I write a blog post about it, or I do a YouTube, or I do a TikTok, and then I send you a link to that, you can take that information, that knowledge. I took your question with a gift and I gave you the answer with a link. That link can be forwarded, that link can be retweeted, that link can be shared on social, and I can go to sleep. And then I can wake up and 100 people have watched that video, or 1,000 people have retweeted that thing. And then we continue to kind of spread that luck. So I want to encourage people to do what you're doing, Lorraine, which is you get that hand up, you get that extra reskill, and then you're bringing it back to the same organization. So when you go out there, you might say, well, gosh, I just got skilled up. What do I have to say? What do I have to blog about? I can't start a YouTube. I'm not an expert. No one's interested in you being an expert. We're interested in you sharing your story about how you did it, because your story is uniquely yours, and there's no one more qualified to tell your story, whoever you are, than you. Don't you think?
Yes, and I think that resonates a lot with a lot of people here, especially we have a lot of participants who are career changers or looking forward to a career change. So I feel, like you said, that gift of paying it forward, in a sense, definitely can help, and sharing your story could be similar to someone else's story, and that can help them.
Yeah, and it's a great time. Like, there's never been a better time to get in tech, because we say tech and we think software engineering, but as you know, there's software engineering, there's testing, there's cloud, there's cybersecurity. There's so many different things. We do have to watch out, though, because we see a lot of people on the TikToks and the YouTubes that are saying, do this 3-month program and then you'll get all this money. You got to focus on the fundamentals, don't you think? Like, I use the analogy of driving a car. It's really, really easy to become an Uber driver right now. Okay, let's say that being an Uber driver is like being in tech, and then the car breaks down. But if you are not familiar with how to change your own tire, or put gas in the car, or maintain your oil, you're going to be an Uber driver that's on the side of the road with a broken car. The same thing applies in tech. Maybe you learn, the syntax, and you can write some basic JavaScript, but you're not looking under the hood. You're not trying new things. You're not thinking about what's underneath the browser. I'm not asking you to go all the way down. You don't need to be a brain surgeon. You don't need to build your own computer from scratch. I just want you to take your comfort level and I want you to go one layer below what's comfortable. So if you drive an automatic shift, maybe learn stick. You know, you don't have to change your tire every time. I'm not asking you to become a mechanic, but maybe change your tire. So think about that in a tech context, right? You do some HTML, you do some JavaScript. Well, how's the browser thinking about that? Or you do some Python, you do some C#. What's the thing that's running that code? Continue to push one layer underneath your comfort zone, and I think it makes you a better driver, if my analogy works.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned the TikToks that show, hey, become a developer in 3 months and get 6 figures, because I feel that is such false information and it leads people to maybe being able to pursue a career in tech, but then giving up because they feel they're not good enough because they weren't able to accomplish something within a short amount of time.
Exactly, exactly. I don't know if this is allowed, but am I allowed to share a slide or two? Is it okay to share my screen?
Absolutely.
Maybe you can right click on me and make
Yep.
me a host so that I can share a screen and maybe share a couple of ideas. While she's doing that, I'm going to bring up a couple of slides because I think it's worth pointing out a few things. I'm going to go ahead and pop up this screen right here and we'll take a look. And I think when you can see it, hopefully that'll be going out to the stream as well. And then if anyone has any questions, of course, they can put them in the chat and then we'll see those as well so that Lorraine and I can answer questions because we want to make sure that people feel welcome here and talking about these things. So to your point about folks on TikTok, we got to talk about attitude and style and what the message is for folks that are reskilling themselves. You tend to find people on those social media platforms that say this, just do it. Oh, there's a pandemic. If you didn't learn 3 programming languages during the pandemic, well, what were you doing with all that free time? Very unhealthy. That's not what we're saying. This is a much more welcome environment right now. We hear a lot about inclusion in tech, and we forget that this is what a computer magazine looked like in 1984. That's the group that I grew up with, where a young lady in pigtails and in bubblegum could be programming on a computer on the cover of a magazine in 1984. And we need to get back to that. We want to make sure that tech is for everybody. So we hope that tech welcomes you warmly. And there's this one quote that I think is really interesting. You hear this a lot when you talk about inclusion. Inclusion isn't being asked to dance. Diversity is being invited to a party, pardon me. Inclusion is being asked to dance. It's an okay quote. A better one, inclusion is being a member of the party planning committee. Think about that. Oh, there's a party, threw a party. Are you invited? Oh, you're not included. That's not what we want. We want you building parties of your own. We want you building new tables. You know how they always say, I want a seat at the table? They never talk about who built the table. We need to make sure that folks are included in the actual creation of the platform itself. And this means all kinds of people. I made the comment before about how, hey, he looks like a privileged guy, right? Well, one of the things that's interesting that I don't have to share is I'm a type 1 diabetic and I have multiple medical implants and they keep me alive. I would be dead 50 years ago. I would not have survived. I'd survived 2 weeks. And what is it that saved me was tech. So I've got these insulin pumps and medical implants. So I've actually made an Xbox avatar with its own little continuous glucose meter. Why? Because all kinds of inclusions matter. Color, gender, whether you're a vet or not, invisible disabilities are so important. And expressing those and making sure that people see that you can do that. In fact, after this presentation, when I was talking about my blood sugar on stage, a dad came up afterwards and said, that's amazing. He was in tears because his son had just been diagnosed type 1 diabetic and he wasn't sure if his son would be able to have a job like that. But to see someone like him, like his son on stage, that matters. So remember, when you're joining into tech, you are potentially someone's inspiration. And they're going to say, oh, that person looks like me, or came from my neighborhood, or came from my group. And that's super important. And we also want to make sure that we're not hoarding information. This is a quote here about how knowledge is power and tends to be hoarded. That's what's great about Reskill America, is that there's nothing being held or kept back. There's no secret book of all the knowledge. We want to make sure that we're not the kinds of experts that don't want people to understand what they do, right? We don't want to be gatekeepers. Ever heard that term, gatekeeper, where someone is controlling the information flow, preventing you from being in tech. Oh, that's too hard. You can't do that. You're not, you need the wrong degree. That language doesn't work. You went to this program or that program. We are not going to be biased based on personal preference or social influences. We want to make sure that we're putting out positive energy in everything that we're doing. I know that that's something that you stand for, Lorraine, and it's something that I feel strongly about as well.
Absolutely. And from my prior experience in the first cohort, the community that was built with the participants was just, there was no gatekeeping. Everybody was sharing resources, free text, anything
Love
that
it.
could come out. Yeah, just holding sessions, challenging each other with algorithms or UX design challenges. It was just a very lovely group, and it was just very empathetic and compassionate and helpful. It's a wonderful organization.
That is so lovely to hear because that's so important for us to feel like we belong here and that you winning doesn't mean me losing, right? We can lift everybody up and there's enough room for everybody. And we can agree that that sense of that hustle culture is just not what we're looking for here. We're not trying to think about hustle culture. We want to be really deliberate in how we're doing things. We want to be intentional and focused, and we want to lift up ourselves and we want to lift up others. And I love that you're doing that. It's also worth pointing out that even though, like I mentioned before, I've been in tech for 30 years, that knowledge could be used as a kind of a cudgel. I could use that as a threat. Well, Lorraine, I've been doing this 30 years. Everything I learned 30 years ago, all the languages, all the operating systems, they're all dead. Nothing computerized that I learned in school is around anymore. So why is it okay for me to say, well, my degree from 1992, oh, blah, 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 blah. We're all amateurs. We're learning. Tech is moving so fast that there really are no professionals. So when someone says, hey, do you have 20 years experience? You have to ask yourself, is it 20 years or is it the same year's experience 20 times? Are they growing? Are they intentional? Are they present in the job that they're in? And are they trying to push themselves forward? In fact, during the pandemic, my family and I went over a course of about 4 years, the last 2 years being in the pandemic, we got our black belts. So I was feeling myself. I was feeling pretty fantastic. I was like, you can't tell me nothing because I'm black belt. Now I'm only a first Dan black belt in Taekwondo, but my sensei, my master, is a ninth Dan who's been doing it since the mid 60s. And he made sure to understand that, hey, congratulations on your black belt. And now the work starts. It's like, well, what was the last 4 or 5 years, man? What are we doing? I mean, now I get started and you never stop. And you never stop. Now you get started. So when you graduate, what you're really learning at Reskill is how to learn. And you want to be, very modest. Do you know who this gentleman is, Lorraine? Do you know what he did? Probably won't recognize him. It's okay.
No, sorry.
Okay, so his name is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and he invented the World Wide Web. And I think it's really cool that he's a very modest individual. You don't know who he is. He's not on Oprah. He's not on talk shows. Notice that he didn't put senior next to his title. He just said web developer. He could have said the web developer. Oh, you're a web developer. Yeah. I made the web. He invented the web. But he's chill about it because the web has grown into something bigger than he ever could have imagined. So why bonk people on the head with that knowledge of what he's done, right? Be welcoming. So when you see him in educational videos and stuff, you'd never know that he was the guy that invented it. And I think that's a good way to think about these things, in my opinion.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I feel a little embarrassed that I didn't know who it was.
But see, it doesn't matter, right? It's like a director in a movie. Like we know the actors, but we don't know the directors. But what's cool about it is that he looks like somebody's uncle, and he could, somebody you can hang out with. And if someone is an inventor and they're like overly egotistical about it, I don't think that's very welcoming, and that doesn't make people want to feel included. Certainly, if he was keeping all that knowledge to himself and hiding that information, then we would all feel lousy, and the web wouldn't have been the web that we know it, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How are we doing on time? I see if there's maybe some questions that have come in from the chat.
Yeah, one question we have so far is how do you personally contribute to inclusion around you?
That's a very good question. As I mentioned at the very beginning, my primary focus is to lend privilege as much as I can. So I have a position at Microsoft that is a rank higher than senior. So I benefit from level privilege, which I think is, as the organization that you work for, there's some hierarchy a little bit. So then if someone's a board member or in charge of something, they can lend their level privilege by bringing others into the room and giving them exposure. So what I try to do to contribute to inclusion around me is to bring new engineers and early in career engineers into rooms they would not ordinarily be invited to. So if someone says, yeah, the senior engineers are going to go off and talk about some new architecture, pause, why don't you join us? And then now an opportunity has presented itself. Are you prepared? If you sit quietly, and that's fine, you weren't prepared, the opportunity happened, no harm, no foul. But if you're ready, then you say something, you go, oh wow, she really knocked it out of the park. We should invite her to the next one. And now I've lent my level privilege and then sponsored, not just mentored, but sponsored a person by putting a spotlight on them and lifting them up into a new space.
Oh, that's great. That's really, yeah, no, and I feel like that's what's needed, especially in the tech. I know we are always discussing diversity and equity in tech. So it's having more of that is very helpful. As you said, with the imposter syndrome and with just like you said, elevating others there. Another question I would have, I'm sorry.
Please.
Another question, a lot of people are very eager. So right now in Reskill, we have an introductory phase. It's about 4 weeks long, where we just present all the material. People are very excited to get started with their specific tracks. You had a chance to look at the curriculum, and I feel maybe hearing from you as far as the curriculum that Reskill is providing, what level of comfort, and I know it all depends on the amount of work that someone puts in, like you said, going under the hood a little bit, but how does that prepare someone for life after Reskill?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that actually is a good question that can piggyback a little bit off of another question that Olu just put in the chat, which is talking about how someone is going from an experience like, no experience or little experience into being a person in tech. And I think a good example of that is thinking about how problem solving happens. So problem solving as a concept is really just asking yes, no questions at scale. So you're going to come in as a new person who may not have a background in tech, and you're going to start thinking about memorizing languages and for loops and keywords and how to Google for stuff, and you're going to feel overwhelmed. But what I think people miss out on, and I think that Reskill is good at doing, is explaining the context or the system within which the technology that you're learning exists. So here's an example, and I'll put you on the spot a little bit, but it'll be in a fun way, I promise. So we're going to learn how to program. We're going to learn how to solve a debugging problem. Lorraine, my toaster is broken. What should I do? Lorraine does not know I was going to show her this. What should I do about my broken toaster? Any suggestions on a good way to think about that? What's that?
Make sure it's unplugged first before playing with it.
I love that. I love that. So some people say buy a new toaster, and they just like that's their answer to everything. Just buy a new toaster. But I love that. So Lorraine's first gut reaction was, is the power on? Safety first. I love that. So you nailed it. You got it right in the first try. So we're thinking about the system in which this toaster exists. Now, it doesn't matter if the toaster is a toaster or if it's a web server or if it's an application that you're writing for Reskill that you can't get to compile. So now let's say that the power doesn't look like it's on. Nothing's happening. Maybe I can plug something else in, plug in a lamp, right? Maybe I think about fuses. I'm going to go into the garage and check for the fuse box. Is there any power on in the house? Think about how extraordinary that is. In 4 questions, we've gone from I want hot toasted bread to I'm in the garage looking for the fuse. That's super interesting. So here's the thing. Here's how you know if you're a programmer or maybe you're meant to be a techie. You ask yourself, do the neighbors have power? I wanted breakfast and you're sticking your head out the window saying, are the neighbors' lights on? That's a person who recognizes that the toaster doesn't exist alone in the universe. There's power, there's the power grid, all these different things. That's debugging. So when you do the same thing, when you're debugging a program, you're finding yourself asking these yes, no questions. And the difference between you, the new early in career person, not you, but those who are watching, and a senior person is that we stuck around in tech for long enough to collect all of those questions. And then we just have them available to us. You're doing these things all the time. Something breaks around your house, washing machine doesn't work, start thinking about those systems. So to a question that was put in the chat, what advice would we give for someone who has no background in tech? Start looking around. If you look at your thermostat, that's a computer. You look at your phone is more powerful than any computer that I had growing up. When you connect Bluetooth to your car or your headphones, that's a computer. And here's the mind blower. Somebody out there is a programmer who wrote that code. So when you're in the car and you do your Bluetooth, or you're on the bus and you take your headphones and you pair them, a whole group of people, we could find them, we could go and get their names, designed the Bluetooth, they wrote the code, they made the headphones and the phone go together. You know how you can look on your phone and see where the bus is and see that the GPS, someone designed that. The signage in the bus, that's a computer telling you that the next stop is coming up. How did they do that? You don't know the answers, but you can find them out. So what I want to encourage people to do, if you have no background in tech, is start seeing tech everywhere around you and start drawing these parallels between different kinds of tech. Do you know what these objects are, Lorraine?
I do.
Okay, what do we got?
I'm assuming the first one's a CD player. At least that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it does look like a CD player. It's a hard drive, but you're exactly right. A disc with information encoded on it. So good job.
And the record player, but the old one, I forget what they're called.
Yeah, Victrola, or it's an old Victrola. Yes. Exactly. So Lorraine has pointed out here that we have two circular discs with data encoded on them, one made in the 21st century and one made in the 18th or 19th century. It's the same idea. CD player, Blu-ray, hard drive, record player, discs with data encoded in them. So being able to draw those parallels and go, hang on a second, maybe I know this thing. What are some other things that you might already know in your environment? So that's the advice I would give someone who has no background in tech. When you're at Kroger or you're at whatever and you're doing the self-checkout, somebody wrote that. That could be you. How did they do that? What problems did they have to solve? Dissect it. How do you think that works? What's it running? How do they do the scan thing? How do the code? I'm looking for those things in everywhere in my life, and I find that fascinating. And if you enjoy that kind of problem solving, then a career in tech is exciting for you.
Thank you. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions.
I know that's a lot and it's intense, but I hope you can feel my excitement that there's new people that are happy and excited to work in tech.
Yes, not only excitement, but you definitely put it in a way that we can all understand and really, just the real life examples that you're giving, and it's something that we can all take home and really get started.
I'm glad.
All right. Yes, everyone's loving all your analogies.
I happen to be I'm kind of an analogy person. That's my whole vibe. One thing I do want to offer as a suggestion for those who may want to hear more of these kinds of things. If you look at my name is Scott Hanselman, like Hansel and Gretel man, and I have a podcast called the Hansel Minutes Podcast. And I want to point something out here. I've done over 863 episodes of this show. I'm just going to gently scroll while I'm talking to you. And do you notice anything interesting about the faces that you see going by?
Beautifully diverse faces.
Isn't that funny? It's kind of like walking in the mall, isn't it? And I think you and I share a belief that tech should look like the mall. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. And I want to point out that I'm still talking, and I'm only in the 600s. Remember when I said before, like Captain America, I can do this all day. I'm still going. So if you want to see cool faces, cool people talking about cool tech, check it out. Not every podcast is two dudes talking about JavaScript.
That's good. Yes, and I did. I will post these links again, but I did post them on the Slack channel for our participants, your podcasts, and all your social medias. And I'll
I'm
do that
glad.
again for easy access. Let's see. How do you gain experience while trying to get hired?
Ooh, that's a great question from Bunmi in the chat right there. I think that the best thing to do is to look for experience where you think you might not have it. For example, when I was trying to get hired, I was sitting at a sandwich shop, a Quiznos sandwich shop, and the guy was trying to get his little shop online. So I offered to do his website, and I learned about things doing that. And then he said he wanted to take orders over Twitter. So I made an application called Tweet Sandwich that would just listen on his Twitter. And when someone tweeted him, it would print out the tweet on a receipt. So I used his little order thing. This is before Uber Eats and before all of those things. So you would tweet the shop and it would print out the sandwich and then you'd come and pick it up. So I was looking for solutions and opportunities to make solutions anywhere that I possibly could. If your church or your community center needs a website, get involved, help them. There's always someone around you that needs something. So you can fill your profile or your portfolio rather with, samples and, take and Connect Four and, dice rolling games, or you can solve business problems for real people. And in my opinion, the people who need the help are the people in the community. Can you help your church, your community, your senior center? What can you do? Go and teach old people how to use iPads. All of that is experience. So you may already be doing those things. You may already be volunteering at a high school, or you may have a small business that you did for yourself or for your cousin. Make those websites, make those tiny apps, and put those all up there.
Excellent advice. In addition, what advice do you have about applying to big tech, Fortune 500 companies versus startups?
Yeah, I feel like that's really challenging. One of the things that people don't like to hear is that the problem with big tech and Fortune 500 companies is that everybody wants to work there. So your number one challenge is getting out of the pile. There's a pile. For every job, there's 150, 200, or 1,000 jobs, people that are going in there. So when you can get a warm introduction, that doesn't mean randomly LinkedIn somebody and saying, hey, can I pick your brain? Can I take you to coffee? I get 50 of those a week. But go to user groups, be present, be someone who, I've seen Lorraine like 3 different times in the last month. I guess she's working so you're in my brain because you're at the local user group, or you're in the Discord, or you're a positive, visible member of the community. So then when an opportunity comes up, I'll go, Lorraine would be great for that. Then you have the warm introduction. You go, oh, yeah, I know someone who works for Intel. I know someone who works for Nike. I'll introduce you to them. It doesn't guarantee that you'll get the job, but it gets you out of the pile. Step 1, get out of the pile. You do that with a warm introduction or someone who can refer you. Step 2, make through the phone screen. And then when you get the interview, now you've got the door open and you're at least you're in their machine and they want to find you a job. Startups are a lot easier because there's just fewer people. There's fewer humans involved. So yeah, step 1, what can you do to get out of the pile? And that is through being a social developer, a visible developer. Good questions, friends. Good questions.
Yes, very good. Somebody wants to know, what about the amount of hats that you may be forced to wear without the necessary real world experience with startups?
That's a lovely question. That's a tough one. I wonder what you think about that, because you will have to be a Swiss Army knife. If you're familiar with the Swiss Army knife, it's like a funny little knife and a mediocre pair of scissors. That's what startup experience is. If you go to a company, a big giant Microsoft or a big giant Twitter, you'll be like, you're the React dev, and you're never going to learn about the full stack. Like you go work at a mechanic, you change oil, you'll never touch a tire, you'll never put gas in the car. So there's something to be said for throwing someone in, not the deep end, but the slightly uncomfortably deep end where you can still touch your feet at the bottom of the pool, but you're not going to drown. If you get thrown into a startup without necessary real world experience, that's actually a good thing. If it's an emotionally fulfilling place, if it's a psychologically safe environment, if you can be given the opportunity to fail appropriately, because you're never going to be prepared. There's nothing you can do. You can't get experience without a job. You can't get a job without experience. It's a cycle. So you always have to be in a job where you feel about 70% qualified. And we have seen that historically underestimated people tend to wait until they're overqualified before they apply to a job. And folks that may be overrepresented tend to apply for that job very enthusiastically. And I think that if you feel about 70, 80% like you can do it, then you should apply. And then you'll pick up the next. You pick up the next.
It's good to hear with the whole 70%, because I think you hit it right on the head with some people really feel they need to have 100% of the skills necessary. So it's nice to hear, just dive in, don't drown, but get at least 70% of your information there. As
Exactly.
far as social skills, they're saying a participant saying social skills would be key in a situation like that. But how does one get over the anxiety of it?
Yeah. So they practice. Here's the thing. I've got a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I'm going to be taking the 16-year-old to get his driver's license next week, and he's freaking out. How do you solve it? You do it a lot. How do I give speeches in public? I've done it a lot. Did I stand up when I was 12 and I got on stage and I was comfortable? Some people are like that, but most people aren't. You practice. You have to get into the deep end of the pool, and the way you do that is by going to the middle part of the pool. Try Toastmasters. Have you ever done Toastmasters, Lorraine? You ever heard of that?
I have heard of it. I have not done it.
So Toastmasters is a public speaking group. You get together and you practice public speaking. Another great one is called Comedy Sports. Comedy Sports is it's an improv, like whose line is it anyway? But you basically learn how to think on your feet. People don't realize that they'll go to the gym and they'll work out their muscles to get stronger, but they have to work this muscle. You're uncomfortable public speaking, you're uncomfortable talking to groups, get comfortable. How do you do it? By starting small. Set up a small study group. Be the organizer, be the person that organized the study group of 3 or 4 people. That's probably outside someone's comfort zone. Then take that group and make it 4 people, make it 10. Now can we turn it into a regular user group? Encourage others to speak. Assign works, make a book club. Like, these are all opportunities for one to get comfortable with doing that kind of stuff. And slowly you'll realize that you're okay and they're okay and you did it, and you will get over your anxiety. But you have to work the muscle.
I wrote down Toastmasters. I definitely have to work on that one. Would you recommend, sometimes I've read many times that people get stuck in the cycle of continuous learning and not really making the next move. So if you could speak a little bit on that, but in addition, do you recommend any additional courses through like Udemy or other websites that might provide some help to continue learning a skill?
I'm not personally a fan of W3 schools or Udemy, but I am a fan of continuous learning. So I think that there are certain places like Pluralsight, and there are other small and mid-level places where you can learn courseware. Some of the stuff on W3 schools tends to be a little out of date. A lot of the stuff on Udemy sometimes tends to be, let's just say, borrowed, if not stolen, which is kind of inappropriate in my mind. But to Boonmi's point, getting out of tutorial hell, that is a kind of a failure to launch. It's like, I don't want to take the flippers off of my arms when I swim, right? So I can do tutorials. I know how to do tutorials. The most important thing is to build something. Come up with something you care about and build it. You can do tutorials all day long, but if you can make a website for yourself, make an app for your family. For me, with my diabetes, working on applications that help me manage my diabetes means that I care about the project. If you're making a website for your mom so that she can sell her pottery, that's going to be great because you love your mom and she loves pottery, so you care. It's hard to get emotionally invested in a tutorial. I think it is easy to get emotionally invested in something that solves a problem that exists.
Do you have any advice on resumes, and what would be the best way to craft your resume when you have no other tech experience? So myself, for example, I'm a teacher, and if I wanted to transition into tech.
So my two things. My wife had an MBA and she did a bunch of work in nonprofits, and then we had kids, and then she was out of the job market for 5 years and then didn't know what that 5 years gap should look like. But you're managing budgets, you're a problem solver, you're a teacher. So that sounds like information synthesis, right? Problem solving at scale, managing large groups, right? Managing diverse groups with opinionated groups. conflict resolution. I mean, like, this is not buzzwords. This is real. Like, I know how there's always jokes about how you can just like put a bunch of BS on your resume, but that's not BS. It's true, right? Here's the most important thing that people don't realize. You have a skill. You're just not taking credit for it. And it's not a flex if it's true. Oh, I don't want to flex. It's not a flex if it's true. Are you good at that? Yes. Then put it on the resume. You solved problems at scale with a group, right? You synthesized huge amounts of information. You did lesson plans, and on and on and on. I love it. Tia in the chat is saying, "You make the effort, you put yourself out there." Love it.
Yeah.
A lot of great stuff in the chat, in the chats.
In your opinion, what's more important, switching careers due to passion, but maybe less pay, or due to a high job demand?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. Okay, so this is where we get into big philosophical stuff here, okay? You have to know who you are. What do you want? Okay? We're in a weird place. There's a lot of late stage capitalism and the world's a mess right now, and it's easy to get depressed, and some people just want to pay rent. Don't let anybody say that it's a problem or that it's not okay for you to get into tech because you want to get paid. And at 5:01, you want to punch out. That's fine. Now, here's the hard part. If you have passion, you will probably do better because you have passion, right? Like, I could have been a first cello, but I don't care about the cello. But maybe first cello made a lot of money. Well, then I'm in a passionless job. Now, that doesn't mean you need to eat, breathe tech all day long, 12, 15 hours a day. But if you like your job, you're more likely to wake up in the morning and like your job, right? So that's a real challenge. At least find something about it that you like. Otherwise, a job that you hate will betray you, you know?
Excellent. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I agree, it's like you said, there's two parts to it. It's okay to want something for the money, but like you said, being passionate makes the day go better.
Yeah, it really does. And I see that Candace wanted a question to get answered, but I didn't see the original question. So something about tech companies and SaaS, but I'm not seeing the original question. So I'd love to, oh, here we go. Is that, no, I'm not seeing it. Maybe we can ask that question again.
All right, I'll scroll through the chat too, see if I see it. Oh.
Cornelia is saying that they're here because they're passionate and they just love it, willing to take a pay cut. I dig it.
If you're already working for a SaaS company, does Reskill Americans have a formalized internship requirement for someone like me to intern at my current company? That's a good question. That's
a question for you.
Yeah, or Shay. As of right now, we do not have a formalized internship, but things progress and things change. So I don't want to say never, but as of right now, the program is just a training program to get you ready with some entry-level skills. But maybe we can get some of the curriculum developers to answer those questions, and we can answer that on the Slack channel.
I think it's really interesting. I'm seeing a lot of great comments and folks saying that sometimes they're hearing the exact opposite of what other people are telling them. Here's one of the things that's really important, friends who are watching on the chat here. We've got a ton of people on YouTube. The great thing about advice is you don't have to take any of it. You don't know me. If you think that I want you to win, and if you think Lorraine and I and our friends at Reskill care about you winning, then take our advice. But if you think that your boss at work wants you to win, then listen to them. But you get to decide. You don't have to take any of the advice. You know, you can also just take the pieces of advice that make you happy and ignore the others. So don't take all the advice. That's the great thing about advice. You don't have to take it if you don't like it. The shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. Some great folks in the chat here.
Absolutely. What's your take on taking an internship position versus a full-time role and learning on the job? And I'll add a little to that. What's your take on paid or unpaid internships as well?
As someone who started in an unpaid internship, not a fan. Pay people for their work. So definitely not a fan of that. You need to get paid for your work. Even my first internship was $10 an hour. but at least I was getting paid. It changes how you are there. It changes your presence when you show up. So that said, I think that people should get out of an internship as quickly as they can, even if it gets into a junior role, because an internship is a pre-junior role. It's a trial period. So the quicker you can get out of that, the better. And then you'll spend more time with a job and less time with intern on your LinkedIn.
Excellent. I love this question. Any advice for the not so young crowd wanting to get into software engineering field and how to maximize their opportunity? I feel like I have had those issues with myself as well. And sometimes you think maybe you're too old, and is it too late, or is anyone going to want me? Age discrimination or age bias is also a real thing.
It is. Yeah, I think that it is a real thing. It is tough. I do have gray in my beard. I did have hair at one point. So I do think about those things. But remember that there's maturity that you bring to the space. To go back to the example of my wife who worked in a nonprofit and then decided to quit her job. We had kids. And then when she went back, she didn't go back to that nonprofit. She went to become a nurse. So now she's the oldest nurse at the place. Not because she's been in nursing for 20 years, she's only been in nursing for 5 years, but she adds a level of maturity. So here she is, a 50-year-old nurse with a bunch of 22-year-olds, and she's already getting opportunities for leadership on the floor because of the presence that comes with maturity. So I think that someone who is moving into an environment as an older or elder millennial or elder programmer, that they offer a lot to the space, and you need to build to those strengths because you have life experience, you have problem solving experience, just not necessarily in the technical space. And you may get tagged for leadership quickly. Here's a great question. I want to jump in here. Jay just commented that they had a question about coding for the music aspect of software. I want to encourage them to look at Sonic Pi. I just had the gentleman who invented Sonic Pi on my podcast. This is great. If you like music, you like DJing, go to YouTube and search for Sonic Pi, and you'll watch someone DJ live while coding, where the code makes the music. So not spinning turntables, literally writing code, and the music comes out, and you can watch him live. So they do entire DJ sets with code rather than turntables. So I think Jay would get a kick out of that. And it's free software. You could do it tonight.
All right, I'm taking notes so I can post this all on Slack as well.
Good deal.
All right. So
Glendora says that mature folks can keep up with the young people. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jim.
My work says, a participant says that their work is willing to offer them an opportunity to intern with the potential to move to programming if they see their skill set. I'm in a position to prove myself. Okay, so I think that was just in response to, I apologize, to the previous statement. How does a new developer stack up against AI around the corner? Does AI make coding more accessible to new developers?
Ooh, that's a good question. All right. So if you ever get the chance to drive in one of those cars that has autopilot or will stay in the line, even, lots of cars, not just Teslas, will drive and stay in a line. They're amazing until they kill you, right? They're amazing until they actually had to stop and turn left. So I think we need to really temper our expectations. When I started programming, we would do it in black and white. We had no autocomplete. We had no IntelliSense. We had no Google. We had a book and a black and white screen. So then when the syntax highlighting or the coloring of the code came out, people were like, that's going to rot your brain. And then they said, oh, well, now when you type a dot, it pops down and it gives you a list of what you can type. Oh, no, you can't do that. That's going to rot your brain. Right? When automatic shift cars came out, my dad was like, oh, my God, you can't drive an automatic. You got to drive a stick. It's going to rot your brain. The same thing applies in AI. It's easier, but it forgets about the fundamental problem solving underneath. It doesn't understand the context. So yes, AI is going to make writing your for loop easier, but I don't think it's going to make problem solving. You're not going to type in a paragraph, make an app that does all of this and starts my entire company. There's still use for humans, and AI self-driving cars are quite a bit farther away. So when we have full self-driving cars, then you can worry about your job, but not anytime before then.
So no Minority Report type of driving yet. So we're
Yeah,
okay.
keep your hands on the wheel, and that
Yeah.
means the keyboard and the wheel.
Do you have any insight as to how the industry in general views the autism spectrum disorder and how we can share our traits that lend well to tech in a positive way during the interview/hiring process?
Yeah, so the most important thing in my perspective, and again, I'm not a person with autism, but I am a person who can focus. And that is one of the superpowers that often people on the spectrum have, the ability to focus, is make sure that you play to your strengths and downplay your weaknesses. And you can do that by simply being straight up front. You can say, I'm on the spectrum, and maybe I'm not going to look directly at the camera, or I would rather have this kind of interview instead of that kind of interview, or I don't do well on Zoom, but if you let me get in front of a whiteboard, I'm going to kill it. Or whatever the thing, whatever your superpower is, simply tell them. And then work those positive traits. And if you can see that the interview is set up to make you fail, see if you can explain to them that I'm going to be able to solve this if with some minor accommodation. And I think asking for accommodation is reasonable.
All right, well, Scott, I really want to thank you for everything, answering the questions. You came really prepared, PowerPoints and slides, and you're very inspiring. I feel like I can start learning tech now. So I thank you. Our participants gained a lot of information with you, and I took a lot of notes, and I'll be posting that on Slack for everyone. And I appreciate you coming out and chatting with us.
Well, that's very kind, and thank you for being so flexible and for hanging out with me today. I know that maybe this wasn't the presentation that we expected, but it was the one that we got, and I hope that I did right by y'all, and I appreciate you, and I would encourage folks to follow me. I'm on TikTok, I've got a podcast, I've got a YouTube, it's all free. I don't want your money, I want you to win. So follow me everywhere.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and we'll be posting some updates on Slack.